Thank you, Mr. MC, and ladies and gentlemen, a gigantic welcome to the tiny island of Jersey. And if you're trying to place the accent, it is pure South African. Best rugby team in the world. That's our African delegation over that side. And folks, they just happen to be here right now. I'm not sure if you're aware, but yesterday the Springbok rugby team arrived in the island of Jersey. They're basing themselves here, and they will be training here for the next while. Indeed, at any point in time, more than half the people on this island have come here from other places around the world, just as you have, and we're honored to have you here. You are here ostensibly for one reason, and that is to safeguard the interests of something that we call the individual. But let me ask a simple but important question. Why bother? What difference does it make? What changes if you do or do not center your worldview around the primacy and inviolability of the individual? Would it not make more sense to prioritize the interests of the group, and as for the lowly individual, let the chips fall where they may? Well, folks, there is an answer to that question, and we will pursue it today. My name is Douglas Kruger, and I speak and write all over the world on the topic of what I like to think of as species-level trends. What is a species-level trend? Well, I'll give you an example. Won't you complete this popular phrase for me? The rich are getting richer and... Right. It's false. Everywhere you go, the belief system is that our species is trending in that direction, and it simply isn't true. The rich are getting richer, that much is accurate. But the poor are getting richer faster than at any other point in the entire sweep of human history. As I document in a book called Poverty Proof, in the past 20 years alone, the tiniest sliver of human history, we lifted over 1 billion people out of abject poverty. There is hope to the narrative of our species, and it ought to be celebrated. Here's another species-level trend. Left to themselves, all human systems tend toward complexity. If you start an organization or if you start a country, over time it will accumulate more and more rules and regulation and people and vested interests and bureaucracy. And as the bureaucracy expands, human freedom tends to contract. But where are our friends from Argentina today? Hey. You are involved in something contrary to the species-level trend, an experiment by which, for the first time in a very long time, you are consciously stripping away excess bureaucracy. We will watch your experiment with great interest. Species-level trends. The wonderful thing about a gathering like this is we have so many cultures, all of whom contribute to the project of human flourishing. Pick a culture, pick a place around the world, and you can put a pin in time and watch how, like ripples, the ideas from that culture and those minds affect the rest of the planet and affect our species. And it gives you goosebumps when you see it in motion. I like the ancient ones. I like to go back to ancient Persia or Greece, or perhaps across to Africa, and see how something that the Egyptians invented changes the way we live today. And there's something astonishing about watching how that flows and how it changes over time. And today I've chosen the one that makes the most difference to what you're here for, this very idea of the individual. And we're trying to answer the question, does it matter that we protect the individual? Why bother? And so for this particular one, we're going to pick up on an innovation from several thousand years ago and trace its efficacy over time. And this was an innovation by the ancient Hebrews. And this is not a Bible lesson, it's simply a history lesson. And so I will sum up the change in thinking, the one idea, in just 3 words. The words were, in his image. This is an idea that has had perhaps more impact upon human flourishing, upon our laws, upon cultures and societies than maybe any other. And if you watch it play out over time, it actually becomes stronger, more efficacious, the further it is developed. And I'll show you exactly how that happened. In his image, what does that mean? Well, it's a very simple shift in thinking. In most societies, in most cultures, it had been the belief that a human being was the subject of the king. The king, the monarch, the emperor. That goes back to the dawn of time. The chief, the person in charge, the government, the state, the prevailing bureaucracy. This simple shift said if humans are made in the image of a creator, then there is something inherently special about them. There is something inherently dignified about every unique individual. And we can't overstate how radical a change in thinking that was. Because instead of being a tool of the king, every human being becomes an end in themselves. And instead of a society having goals that it tries to create, usually in the interests of the king, suddenly individual sanctity is the goal. That's the point. That's the sought-after outcome. Right. Give that idea several thousand years to percolate. Join me in the 13th century. In the intervening time, the Empire of Rome has risen and fallen. Out toward the east, Genghis Khan is carving out territory. Marco Polo is exploring the Silk Route. You have absolutely zero Wi-Fi signal. But you're not concerned about that because you're a simple tradesperson. And you voyaged from afar and traveled across the English Channel to the old Roman city of Londinium, London. And you are there to trade with the locals because you've heard good things about it. But something goes wrong. One of the locals cheats you on a deal. And you appeal to the local authorities with very little hope. And yet the authorities hear your case, and they try it, and they rule in your favor. You weren't expecting that. You travel back home and you share the word that England is a great place to do business. We should go back there and do it again. And it's because English common law has two interesting quirks. Number one, it doesn't belong to the king. For that reason, it doesn't do his bidding. And number two, it is fundamentally designed to protect the interests of the individual. That is remarkable, very counterintuitive. And in fact, it becomes so strong that centuries later, when London burns to the ground in the Great Fire, and the authorities want to rebuild it in neater, straighter lines, they can't. Because their own law upholds the rights of property owners in London. And that's why it looks so incredibly strange to this day. Visually, it is weird. Morally, it is a triumph. It makes for higgledy-piggledy streets, but it also makes for great prosperity. This idea that if you go to England and trade, the law will offer you some degree of protection, regardless of who you are, and that the ruling magistrates and the kings and the mayor don't have power over you, but the law is independent and protects your interest. Well, that becomes the beginning of a long, slow climb to great prosperity for Britain. Indeed, to this day, Britain remains one of the wealthiest nations on earth and one of the centers of innovation. And I have to tell you, for a South African, that's galling to say, but there it is. Hasn't helped them with their rugby, but it's certainly helped them in terms of human flourishing. Now, the fascinating thing about this idea is that it becomes stronger over time. In 1837, compelled by that same notion, this religious notion that informed the culture, and then the policies, and then the law, and which then put the law above the king, they start to realize that they can no longer tolerate the idea of slavery. You have to extend that idea of the protection of the individual everywhere. And they started the biggest project in history to purchase and then free slaves. Starting in 1837, they only paid off that cost in 2015. 9 years ago. That's how much they were compelled to care about the sanctity of individuals whom they had never even met. The idea becomes stronger over time. We're not yet done, because then the idea joins a group of people and sails across the seas to the New World. It's 1775. And we have a group of people who are not just armed with wonderful resources, but they're carrying this notion with them They have this idea of the primacy and inviolability of the individual. And in fact, it becomes so strong over time that they do something never done before in the entire sweep of human history. When they write their constitution, it starts with that one idea. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And the thing that they do is the reverse of what every king and emperor and power structure has ever done in the past before. And again, we live in a world where we perhaps don't quite realize how impactful this idea was. Instead of a constitution telling you what you may do, like every other nation in human history, the king, the chief, the leader, the bureaucracy, the power structure tells you what you may do. For the first time, this constitution tells the power structure what it may not do. Its entire job is to see the individual as the starting point, the cornerstone of a society. And after that, so long as you don't infringe on that, you may build a state around it. And the rise to prosperity became meteoric. Indeed, it became the greatest mass wealth generating project that the species has ever seen. One idea, and it's playing out and spilling out through the course of history. All of our cultures, all of our nations contribute to this project, but that one idea is doing remarkable things. And it's amazing that it does more than what it was designed to do. Initially, the thought among the English was, well, we're trying to be pious, and yet it raised their levels of trade. And the thought among the United States was, well, we're trying to keep the English king at bay, in a grand irony. And what it did was it has unintended consequences for material gain. It led to a level of material gain and a liberating of human talent that we've perhaps never seen before. All of a sudden, you have families able to buy powered chariots, one or two of them, and travel from city to city by themselves in conditions of relative freedom and relative safety. And you have Microsoft connecting the world, and Apple putting a supercomputer in every individual pocket. And you start to see things that you actually can't believe when they play out on the news, but somehow turn out to be true. Things like this. And of course, the most important thing that we must say about this is that he happens to be South African. Folks, we don't know where these ideas go, but here's the fascinating part. You in this room today are engaged in the next level of a species-level trend, refining the idea of the individual and the inviolability of the individual one step further into a complex new world. What evils will you save people from? What giants will you slay at this conference that will make a difference to the prosperity of the individual tomorrow? Are you going to put roadblocks up between power and the individual? And if you do, not only do we ask the question, what will you save people from, but what will you unwittingly unleash in the world of human talent, possibility, and potential that you and I can't even see coming today? There are giants to slay at a conference like this, but it is part of the grand sweep of human history. This convention is global. You've come here from around the world to protect the individual, and we don't know how far that might go tomorrow. If you trace down human history, the idea of the group or the state having power over the individual, you get some incredibly dark results. And we don't have to go down the entire route of that track. It's a bit of a depressing one to watch. But I came across something just yesterday, and I had to share it with you. A person was speaking about this idea of growing states and growing power, and it was all delivered, as it usually is, for the greater good. And then the person speaking with him said, but what about the individuals who are walked over, who are cleared out of the way, who are physically harmed as a result of that project? And the response was, well, you've got to crack a few eggs if you want to make an omelet. And there's a very famous response to that one from George Orwell. who said, "Show me the omelette that you have made with such cruelty. Where is the utopian society that has been built by harming individuals?" The primacy of the individual matters. What you are doing here today matters. You are part of a project that is worth celebrating and worth taking seriously. You have come from all around the world to bring your unique skills, cultural insights, language, your friendships, and the creation of wonderful relations around the world, all to bear on this one simple project, right here in beautiful little Jersey. And I wish you well as you uphold the rights of the individual, slay the giants of tomorrow, and contribute to the well-being of our species. That's something worth celebrating. And welcome to Jersey.